Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're looking at a stack of sources today. Articles, reports, some interviews, all zeroing in on this major proposed bill. Some people are calling it big and beautiful, but wow, it's definitely stirring up a fierce debate about the real cost.
It really is. And what jumps out right away from these sources is just how wildly different the numbers are. Trillions of dollars apart.
Yeah.
So our mission here is just to unpack why are these projections about its impact on the debt so incredibly different? What are the specific sticking points in the sources causing all this friction?
Okay, let's get into it. The core tension, it seems, starts with groups like the Congressional Budget Office, the CBO.
Right.
Your sources show them projecting this bill could add, well, anywhere from $3 trillion up to $5 trillion to deficits over the next decade.
Which is a massive number, and the sources point out that figure just dwarfs other projected cuts people are talking about.
But the bill's supporters, they push back hard on that CBO number, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. House Speaker Mike Johnson, for instance, basically dismisses it. He argues, according to the sources, that the CBO is assuming anemic economic growth.
Right. His point being, if the economy does better than the CBO thinks, tax revenues go up and the deficit picture looks better naturally.
Exactly. That's the growth assumption argument. But he also says the bill itself includes a tremendous and historic level of spending cuts. So it's kind of a two-pronged argument there.
Interesting. And then you have others in the administration with different figures again.
Yeah, like OMB Director Russ Vought, the Office of Management and Budget, he actually argues the bill lowers the deficit by $1.4 trillion.
Wow. Okay, so CBO says adds trillions. OMB says cuts over $1 trillion. That's quite a gap.
It's a huge gap. And then Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent brings in another angle. He says the CBO score misses substantial tariff income.
So revenue from tariffs isn't being fully counted by CBO, in his view.
That seems to be the argument, yeah.
Yeah.
He suggests that's part of why the deficit will come down, maybe slowly, but it will come down.
And there's that White House argument about the tax cuts, too, from 2017.
Right, that's a key one from your sources. They're saying extending those existing cuts, well, it shouldn't count as a new cost, because it's just keeping things as they are, not adding a new policy.
But opponents would say letting them expire is the baseline, so extending them is a cost.
Precisely. And how you score that one decision makes a massive difference to the bottom line number. It's fundamental.
So these different takes on growth, tariffs, how to score tax cuts, that's really driving this huge divide. And just to remind folks, your sources say the bill itself includes extending those 2017 tax cuts, raising the debt ceiling, and then significant new spending, especially border security and military.
Exactly. Now let's flip to the critics. They look at these same elements and come to, well, a very different conclusion. Senator Rand Paul, for example.
What's his take?
He essentially says the math doesn't really add up. He looks at the new spending in the bill versus the claimed cuts and argues the spending just swamps the savings.
And he puts a number on it.
He estimates something like $5 trillion in borrowing, but get this, over just 2 years, not 10.
Wow, $5 trillion in 2 years. That's even more dramatic than the CBO's 10-year view.
Much more accelerated, yeah. And you even had Elon Musk sort of questioning, can a bill be both big and beautiful? Maybe implying you can't have both massive legislation and fiscal beauty.
A bit skeptical there.
Yeah.
And Senator Ron Johnson.
He's focused on the long game, basically calling for spending to go back to pre-pandemic levels. He warns against mortgaging the future for younger generations with this kind of debt.
So this isn't just an abstract numbers debate. It's hitting close to home for people, based on your sources.
Yeah.
Mentions of irate crowds at town halls.
Yes, definitely. And a lot of that anger seems focused on proposed changes to programs like Medicaid and SNP food assistance.
How are those changes framed?
Well, supporters talk about curbing waste, fraud, and abuse. But critics and, people potentially affected, they see potential cuts to benefits or stricter eligibility rules. That's where the abstract numbers meet real life.
There was that really striking quote, too, from Senator Joni Ernst about Medicaid concerns.
Yes, the "we all are gonna die" comment at a town hall, that certainly got attention.
And Speaker Johnson countered worries about people losing Medicaid under new work requirements by saying they wouldn't lose coverage unless they choose to do so.
Right, framing it as individual choice rather than a direct policy outcome. Lots of different perspectives there.
Okay, so bringing this back to you, the listener. Why does wading through all this matter? Well, understanding why these expert projections are so incredibly far apart, saving $1.4 trillion versus adding $5 trillion in just 2 years, It's crucial.
Absolutely. The scale alone affects the whole economy, future taxes, government services. And seeing the debate around Medicaid and SNAP shows how these huge abstract figures can translate into very real impacts on people's lives.
So the core disagreement, it really boils down to these fundamental differences in assumptions, right? About growth, about revenue, what counts as a cut versus new spending.
And how you treat things like extending existing tax laws. It's about the basic framework for judging the bill's cost.
So here's something to think about. When you have credible sources, high-ranking officials, looking at the same piece of legislation and coming up with forecasts that are literally trillions of dollars apart.
Yeah.
Well, how much certainty can we really have in any long-term economic prediction?
Yeah, and what does that huge gap in the numbers itself tell us about political negotiation? How do you find common ground when the starting points for what something costs are so fundamentally different?
A lot to consider there. That's all the time we have for this deep dive.